This is Pivot Perspectives with Chris O'Byrne, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they've learned on their road to success, and get exclusive access on how to implement their success into your life and business. Pivot Perspectives is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Chris O'Byrne.
Hey, are you looking to scale your business from 5 figures to 6 figures or 6 figures to 7 figures? If you are, I have the perfect thing for you. What I want you to do today is I want you to go download a book. This book is going to take you through my 3-pillar system. It's 100% free. All you have to do is go to growfast.cash. I say again, go to growfast.cash, and you're going to be able to download my free international best-selling book, which is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. You can take that book. It's going to help you scale your business to the next level. Again, go download it. Be good, be brief, be gone. Growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. Enjoy.
Geoffrey Roche, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris.
So I'll jump right in and try to go as deep as I can on some of these. What is a defining moment from your childhood that helped shape who you are today?
I'll say, without question, a defining moment from my childhood that, always speaks to me was, actually, it's kind of an interesting kind of story. I'll say it was first, my parents divorced when I was 5. And right around that same time was actually when my mother was earning her associate's degree in nursing. And, I can vividly remember sort of that, family is splitting. But at the same time, my mother was taking that really important step in her career. And why I remember that and never like leaves me is the emotional part about it, certainly, but then also the part about it where I got to see my grandmother, who was such an important figure in my entire life, get to see her daughter achieve her dreams. And the irony is that my mother had to pay for her own way to earn that degree, because when she graduated high school, her father had said, well, if you go right to school, I'll pay. She chose not to. And so when it came time for her to do it again, my grandfather wasn't willing to pay for her. And so here she did it on her own, achieved it while she was still raising her 2 children and doing it, obviously through a divorce. And so there was just so much that I learned from that experience. Some of the things that, stick with me today, certainly passion, purpose, persistence, determination, and not allowing, that storm-like aspects to kind of wear you down and just kind of continue to go and achieve it.
Yeah, I think we are even more influenced by our parents' behavior than by what they tell us. And it sounds like your mom was a great model for that, and really probably helped push you to where you are, to how far you've come and all that you've accomplished.
100%. Yeah. And obviously, as you know, it's one of the reasons why even on LinkedIn, my headline is I'm the son of a nurse, because I'm incredibly proud of my mother, certainly all that she has accomplished. And to your point, I certainly wouldn't be where I am today, both, here on earth, but also just in all the work that I do, without not just her influence, but her guiding principles and her sort of guiding light throughout my life.
So then what personal experience shaped you into becoming a heart leader, and why is empathy so important to leadership?
Yeah. So the experience that really made me realize how important leading with the heart and purpose was really early on in my career. I was blessed. So obviously we've talked about my mother, who's a nurse. The irony is that when I started my career in hospital administration, the interim president and CEO at the time was a nurse. And Kathy is her name. Kathy, I was so blessed. Kathy took me under her wing early on in my tenure at the healthcare system. And what I saw was Kathy was this very unique type of leader. Not a leader that I read about, not a leader that I studied in college, certainly not a leader that I heard about in the news or heard others talk about. I described her in many ways as like the healthcare version of Mother Teresa. She had this very powerful humanitarian part of her. She was raised in a military family, so there was also a lot of commitment to service within her. But she never forgot her humble beginnings and the fact that she started as a nurse, worked her way all the way ultimately to become a CNO, a chief nursing officer, a COO, and then ultimately president and CEO. And in her leadership style, what I noticed was she never let the title impact anything. She always focused on intentional, meaningful connection. And within that, talking about what made us collaborative, what made us committed to the work that we did. And she always asked us to focus on two things. One, what's in the best interest of our patients? And two, what's in the best interest of our community? And when she said community, that meant also our team and those that we serve. Mm-hmm. And so I just saw someone who just led with this innate purpose to help and impact others. And that absolutely changed me. And it was really following that experience where I really realized that having a mentor like that, I couldn't even envision a different leadership style.
So then moving into kind of the work that you're doing now, what is the biggest challenge facing the partnership between education and healthcare? And then how can empathy help solve that?
You know, it's such a really important question, Chris, and I appreciate it because I'll tell you, just several months ago, I was asked to deliver a presentation at the HIMSS conference. And for those that aren't in healthcare, HIMSS is one of the largest global conferences for the HIT and clinical professionals in healthcare. And the topic was actually on leading with empathy in the healthcare system and why should we lead with empathy? And during my talk, later I realized I didn't realize earlier that there was actually media in the room. And so after it, a story went viral in healthcare finance news, and it was really summarizing the discussion. And I'll tell you, it was one of those aha moments for me because it spoke to the fact that ultimately when we lead with empathy, we improve culture and we improve morale and we can improve retention. And what this article talked about was that for all those who care about healthcare finance, you should also care about these issues because ultimately how we treat people equals money. How we treat people can be a choice between whether we deliver effective quality care or whether we deliver bad, poor care. It's the reality. And so when I look at healthcare and I look at education, you know, these two industries need each other. Education produces our clinical professionals, our non-clinical professionals for healthcare. But ultimately, we have to teach them and we have to train them to understand what it is to be an empathetic clinician, doctor, nurse, radiologic technologist, whatever the profession is, they need to know what that is and how to deliver care in an empathetic manner. At the same time, we have to do the same for our non-clinical professionals. When I look at the data across all of healthcare today, and we talked a little bit about this earlier before we started, when I look at it even through some of my doctoral research studies right now, I'm a firm believer that if we take a moment each day to sit back and look at all the work we're doing, all the interactions we have, we as leaders need to ask ourselves one thing. What are we doing to lift one another up every day? Or what have we done to tear another person down? If we can answer that question effectively, we will see the bottom line impact and effect. And so to me, it's totally synonymous. And I always believe that, but I'll tell you, after giving that talk at HIMSS and then seeing that article, it further really represented to me how important we need to really be focusing on this.
So how does somebody actually learn to lead with empathy?
Yeah, I do believe it starts with experience, 100%. And I do also believe it comes with stories and stories and really walking in that experience. And I'll give you an example. When I was at my healthcare system, I talked about Kathy, our president and CEO, and our community was dealing with a lot of challenges with homelessness. We as a healthcare system knew we had to respond. The members of our community that were homeless were choosing to seek refuge in our emergency room waiting area or other parts of the hospital, which obviously for our security department was not appropriate. They didn't like it. And in some cases, I learned in the process that they were throwing them out. When I became aware of that in the work that I did, leading external affairs, I had multiple concerns over that. A, what were we doing the most humane aspect to them? Do we know why they're homeless? And how could we do a better job of helping them to find maybe a home, maybe care, maybe support, but something that would help them instead of just pushing them out? And so I went to Kathy and I said, I want to work on this. And, obviously I'm going to need your support. And she said to me, I know you're going to figure out how to do it. And so I called up all these agencies in our county, Salvation Army. I called the county commissioners. I called, the local law enforcement, and I just called everyone else. And I just said, we're going to come into a meeting. We're going to discuss this because we need to, as a community, get this under control. But I came in with the premise that this is not going to be a judgment day. We're not going to be sitting here and talking about them. We are going to figure out how we can help them. And so the first thing I said was, I want any leader that's willing to join me in going and visiting them in their tents. Let's go and meet them. Let's meet them and break bread where they're at. And the first leader who said yes was Kathy. And as you can imagine, when a president and CEO of a healthcare system says yes, other leaders are like, oh, I want to go too, because if she's going, we better go. So a group of us went out and we took on this journey, walking back miles in the woods to meet them along railroad tracks. And what we noticed, Chris, and this is what was so powerful, was some of the most patriotic American flag tents ever witnessed before. They were veterans. Many of them were veterans. Many of them were veterans who did not want to go to the VA for care because of bad care or bad experiences. And so they came to us hoping that we would be a different place. So there was a lot in that experience that really taught me empathy. And long story short, what I later learned about a couple days later was Kathy, our president and CEO, called the county commissioners and she said, I think the commissioners should form a board that focuses on this, that should focus on a couple things. One, how do we provide care to them in a better setting that makes it appropriate of quality, but also in a way that'll make them want to receive the care. And two, I'd like you to create this board and Geoffrey's chairing it. So I get this call from the county commissioners, and the county commissioner said, you've been nominated by all three of us to chair this board. And I thought, oh my gosh, who signed me up for this? Because it was not an easy process, a lot of refereeing because there's a lot involved here between law enforcement and et cetera. But ultimately I said, you know what? After that experience, if there's anything that's going to allow me to have an impact, I'll do it. And so long story short, we did it. We created new care settings for them. We built a veterans homeless housing center for them. We provided care in there through behavioral health and primary care. We improved the health care for the homeless, and we helped to navigate them to find housing. And it was an entire county-wide effort. We brought together people who in the past were judging, critiquing, criticizing, and what it was truly beautiful. And that experience is what really changed me, and in many ways made me say, wow, if we can walk in another person's shoes, or at least come as close to it, we can really make a difference.
How did you handle the different personalities of that board? And I'm assuming the different perspectives and even different goals for what they thought, how this should turn out.
It was never easy. And to your point, there were definitely times where I would shed tears and times where it would be extremely frustrated, because ultimately, even among the homeless community, there was also a lot of division. There were some people who just wanted to remain homeless and never be housed. There were some people who obviously were dealing with trauma that was just so difficult for them to even muster discussing. But what I learned in the process was the most important aspect and thing I could do was listen. And so when we as a board would meet, we always had to meet publicly because it was formed by the county commissioners. Anything we did was public. And I, as the chair, would regularly tell all the other members of the board, our first job is to intentionally and actively listen. That may be uncomfortable for many of you. I know. And it is even for me. But we will listen. And so there were times meetings would go and people would just be really talking and expressing their concerns. And there were certainly times where, other members of the board or other members of the community would be wanting to respond back. And as the chair, I always felt it was my duty and responsibility to A, maintain decorum, B, find a way and find a path that all of us know will move them and our community forward. And so there were times where I had to interject and simply say, your point is a really important one, and so is yours, but the tension that you're representing at this time is not going to move us forward. And I can remember one of the county commissioners was in a meeting once where it got pretty heated, and I simply hit the gavel once and said, all of you need a break, clearly. It pains me to think that it's gotten this tense on a matter of ultimate importance to this community. I'm afraid those of you that are getting this frustrated have forgotten the mission of this cause. And so when you're ready to come back in and be a part of the mission and the cause, you can be back. But until you aren't, I would suggest you take a pause. The rest of us will continue to move forward. But when you're ready to come back, you're welcome. But until then, please take a pause. And I remember the county commissioner was like, oh, whoa. Like, we just saw a very different aspect of Geoffrey. And they didn't fight me. They walked out. They took their pause. And they came back. And I remember after that, people said, wow, we saw somebody who means business. Because ultimately, this mission and this cause is so much greater than any one of us here. But if we find a way to work together, we can move mountains. And that's the way we did it.
It took some nerve to talk to that group that way, but I think that's a really good example of what empathetic leadership looks like, because, being empathetic doesn't mean being a pushover. It means you're being a leader. It's empathetic leadership. So that was actually a great example of how to act as an empathetic leader.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Chris, back to the earlier point, I learned that from Kathy because I saw her as a CEO. Just because she was a CEO doesn't mean everyone respected her or gave her her time of day. And I saw her many times with physicians who still to this day thought they were her boss. Even though she was the president and CEO, she sat on the board as an ex officio member. She had responsibility for the system. And I saw her deal with them. And I remember in her coaching of me, she always said to me, you can't let them get under your skin. You have to let them feel that they're of value, but you have to remind them that you're also of value. And most important, we are all here to contribute value to our patients. And so we're going to figure out how to work together. It may not always be pretty, but we're certainly going to figure out how to do it for our patients. And so I learned a lot from her that, in fact, I can, it's sort of funny to your point, and I appreciate it. People called her after, communities, they talk. And she called me up to the office and she said, wow, you wouldn't believe the call I received today. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh boy, what did I do now? And she said, the chairman of the board of commissioners called and just wanted to say that you schooled even him. And I'm thinking, what? And she said, how you handled that incident today at that meeting was an educational experience, even for the chairman of the board of commissioners. And she said, I just want you to know that commissioner said, wow, what a difference he's making. And I looked at her and I said, no. What a difference we are making, because this was a team effort. I mean, my vice chair was there with me, working hard, in the same way. And, it was very much a team effort, but certainly one that had a lot of education too.
Looking to grow your business beyond 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures plus? What I want you to do is go download this book. The title is called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. It will help you grow your business past 5, 6, and 7 figure. Go download the book today, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and download the book for absolutely free.
So what is one area in healthcare or education that you think needs immediate change, and how would you tackle it?
Yeah. Well, the obvious piece in healthcare that needs immediate change is really how we treat one another. The reality of it is, when you look at employee engagement scores, when you look at culture, when you look at retention and even recruitment, we have just unfortunately gotten to a place in healthcare where we've forgotten the most important aspect, which is humanity. Healthcare starts with an H for a reason. It's all about us as humans. And when I look at all the data and when I travel to hospitals and healthcare systems around the country, it always pains me when I hear these stories of why people are leaving not just the organization, but healthcare as a whole. And 9 times out of 10, they're not leaving because of pay. They're not leaving because of benefits. They're not leaving because of a lack of investment in their education. They're leaving because they were treated poorly. And so we have to get back to the basics. We all deserve and need to be appreciated, valued, heard, and respected. That's cornerstone for all of us. And as leaders and as organizations, we have to ask ourselves whether we have consistently created the right culture and the right environment for that to happen. And when that is not the case, we must make systemic, immediate changes for that to occur, because that is really the root of our problems today. And the reason it's so powerful and why it's so systemic is when you think about our mental health crisis that we have in the world today, and then when you add on the mental health crisis in the workplace, imagine somebody who's dealing with mental health crisis and then being in a workplace that just continues to hit them harder and harder and harder. And so that's why you heard me say earlier, we have to choose whether we lift up or tear people down. That to me is the most important aspect that has to be fixed.
So when do you know when it's time to disrupt the status quo versus simply improving what's already there?
It's a very, very fair question. In my experience, it really starts with a lot of listening and learning in the process. And I think it's different if you're an outside coming into an organization or if you're inside and evaluating it. But I do believe that in my experience, where I've had to work to disrupt or work to improve, there is a certain sense of feeling. So I'll give you an example. I've walked into organizations where I can, get into a meeting and I can already tell just by the aura of the room, there's some challenges here. People aren't speaking. People are looking down. They're not even acknowledging one another in the space. And I do think that can speak to a significant issue. Even introverts want to be valued, appreciated, and respected. Just because you're an introvert doesn't mean you're going to always be quiet. And so if you're just sitting there being quiet, we do have to wonder what's happening here. And I think organizationally and societally, we've come to use this term quiet quitter. Well, I'm going to go so far to say that it's the organization's fault and responsibility when someone reaches that point. Because we as humans are more inclined to be productive and want to seek to make impact. That's just how we are designed. So most people don't just quit. That's not, our nature necessarily. The other piece I would just say is, to your point on when you have to choose to disrupt, I think it's really important when you particularly see leaders who are very toxic. That's where I have seen you need to think about how you disrupt. Now, that doesn't come without potential ramifications. It doesn't come without potential challenges. Even in my career, where unfortunately I've served with some toxic leaders, there have been times where I've had to challenge respectfully those toxic leaders. And, ultimately I ended up on the outside and not in the inside. But I was okay with that because to me, sometimes you also have to be that courageous soldier that's going to take that battle on and realize that at the end, you're not going to be a part of that, but you did it for the right reasons. And so, we do have to be willing to stand up for these aspects because in those situations, I didn't just stand up for me as Geoffrey. I stood up for all the other people in that workforce who I know were just being continued to face what I consider to be trauma and abuse. And look, the first thing I did is I looked to take some of those people to another organization, and I did successfully because those, everyone deserves, again, a space where they feel valued, appreciated, heard, and respected.
Yeah. So how has being a father influenced your leadership style, especially when it comes to empathy?
I would say there is no greater blessing, obviously, than to be a parent. And obviously for some people who can't be, I know certainly that's difficult to hear. But for me, when I look at my three sons and certainly the influence on leadership, I'll tell you where it has certainly influenced me is to remember the importance of service to others from the vantage point of I have to model the way. To your early point when we were talking about my mother, I have to model the way. And as parents, we have to acknowledge that sometimes we will make mistakes. Sometimes we will not do the right things either. But I have to model the way. And sometimes it's tough, particularly with a busy work schedule, to model the way always because work-life balance can be tough. But I also believe one of the ways that it has certainly reminded me of empathy is the importance of storytelling. And so I regularly like to talk to my children, my sons, about, stories of my childhood and, stories that will help them understand why I do what I do. And I lost my father several years ago to a sudden cardiac arrest. And, obviously my sons, lost their grandfather in that process. But we talk a lot about, different stories and different experiences so that they can also still understand that and get a sense of kind of how I go about that. The other point I'll just make is it also, as a leader, serves as a great foundational reminder for us and for me to acknowledge that I could be working with others that also have children or those that don't, but maybe they're taking care of a parent or taking care of another relative. And so it also reminds me to always be thinking about the fact that I don't know what others are going through, just like they may not know what I'm going through, which means the more we can be compassionate and empathetic in what and how what we do will always have an impact. And that piece has certainly been an important reminder to me. And so, the final point I would make is it always reminds us to have put our family first. And why that's important is, even this morning I was a little late to my first meeting. And when I got on, I said to everyone, hey, sorry, just want to remind you I had to take the kids to school. And everyone was so good about it, And so, those pieces, and look, if they weren't good about it, I really wasn't going to care either, because the reality of it is I have to take them to school. That's the reality. And so, that piece I think is always really, really important.
So how do you keep a balance between leading with purpose and driving innovation when you're in high pressure environments?
Yeah. Well, I think the best way to keep balance is you have to also take care of yourself. That is really, really important. And I will tell you, that was not always something that I did well. And so, I look at, I always say we also have to be vulnerable about these things too, because when we're vulnerable, others can find connection.
Yeah.
Innovation takes a lot of work. And when you're in an intense pressure, it obviously even takes more work. But the only way to remain constant through that is to put yourself in the strongest position mentally and physically to be able to perform. And so for me, what has allowed me to do that has been to, wake up every day and do a high intense cardio workout, really focusing on me. And it sounds crazy, but when I'm running 4 miles in a very high tense environment, that's where I get my thinking in. That's where I get my reflections in. That's where I sit there and think, I can do this. If I don't do that, I know I'm going to be working the day and I'm going to doubt. I'm going to have self-doubt come in because I didn't have that chance to just start that day out in a way that is of benefit to me. And so that self-care piece is so critical. And again, I didn't always do that very well. And what I learned is when I do, it's a total different experience. And I'm not just ready to take the day on. I'm prepared for those high intense challenges. And it also, honestly, has made me more empathetic. In fact, I will tell you that some of my closest friends and family will say to me before that journey, people will say to me, wow, you are such a different person now. And I'll never forget when somebody said that to me. It was one of those moments, was like an aha moment that was like, wow, I obviously didn't like even who I was. But for them to say that says a lot. And so, this is why leaders need to be vulnerable. We need to be open to sharing our struggles and our challenges too, because it's also how others see and find the way for themselves.
What is the most surprising or inspiring thing that you've learned from interviewing other leaders? And then how has that impacted you?
That's a really, really insightful question that, I'll tell you, certainly I love, the opportunity to speak with other leaders and learn from other leaders. And, I'll tell you that a dear colleague, mentor, and leader recently shared her story very publicly on how she's faced the imposter syndrome. And, as I was reading that and knowing the conversations that she and I have had, she's an executive in a very large healthcare system, very successful, very accomplished individual that obviously also leads with her heart very effectively. I was reminded so much that we as leaders have to be people first. We're humans too. And we need to be willing to share those challenges. And so I have really appreciated talking with other leaders, studying and researching leaders that are willing to tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because the reality of it is life is tough and leading is tough. But when we share, we are also in it together. So those are some of the things. The other piece I'll say is, I will never forget early on in my career, I had an opportunity because of my president and CEO, Kathy, to go with a group of other leaders to President Franklin Roosevelt's presidential library as part of a cultivation event that we did. And we went to the CIA, which, for anyone that likes food, always say go. It was a great experience. And then we ended the day at the presidential library. And President Roosevelt, obviously led at a very interesting time in the United States. But one of his most famous quotes that always has stuck with me and also speaks very much to him was, he said, and it was a longer quote, but the ending part of the quote is what I have always resonated with. He said, above all, try something. And that piece has always stayed with me, because when things are tough, when we're working on projects, when we're trying to help people, when we're facing our own internal struggles, we can't give up. We can't stay back. We've got to try something. And every little step is still a step of progress. And, even a rejection shouldn't be viewed as a rejection. It should be viewed as a positive redirection. And so what I've learned in talking with a lot of leaders and continuing to research leaders is the most effective, successful ones are individuals who understand it truly is about mindset and shifting our mindset to know that it is possible. And, as I think about President Roosevelt, a man that faced a lot of challenges, healthcare issues himself, being disabled, he never really shied away from trying something. And so, I think that there's just so much that we can learn in those experiences.
So, how do you teach leaders to build a culture of empathy in their organizations?
Yeah. So the first thing that I always do with leaders in thinking about this is we have to get to the very basic part of who we are. And so organizationally, most organizations obviously have a mission, vision, and values. And I oftentimes will ask them, how have those mission, vision, and values been cascaded down and up and throughout the organization? How much do people feel a sense of purpose and connection to them? And then, because ultimately a lot of times they have values that are very human focused: integrity, respect, empathy, for example. And then I will always say, how do you communicate to your colleagues? What does that look like? What's that experience like? Are you using the power of storytelling? Why storytelling is so important as it relates to this topic is all of us are called to serve in one way or another. Whether we're a housekeeper in healthcare, whether we're making food in healthcare, whether we're a nurse or a doctor, we're all there to serve. What's our purpose? What's our connection? Talking about that purpose and connection is super, super important. The second is talking about how we as individuals want to communicate. We've got many different generations in the workplace. Those communication strategies are different by generation. But what we know is people still want to be communicated to and with. Maybe different, but understanding that is super important. And so taking time to work through these things is really, really important. And so ultimately, I do feel strongly that it comes down to a genuine, meaningful connection with one another. And in large organizations, that can be harder, but you can still find a way to connect it back to purpose and connect it back to those mission, vision, and values and ensure that you're doing it. So in my healthcare system, we were, 2,000 plus organization, certainly smaller than the one that I'm serving in today, but we still were always connecting it back. We were always encouraging one another to share. And so when we did updates to mission, vision, values, it was employee driven. It was not executive driven. And so that piece is super, super critical. And the final piece I'll just say is I have been reminding leaders that leadership starts with L for a reason. L for listening. The more that a leader can do to just simply sit back, create the safe space, and allow people to talk and not respond until everyone has had a chance to speak can really speak volumes of really perpetuating a really empathetic and effective culture. I've seen that, and I've seen it done really, really well, and I've seen it done very poorly. And the difference was always whether that leader was intentionally, actively listening. That's when I saw innovation occur, and it's also where I saw people feel like they were the change agents. They were the solution to ultimately deliver the most effective care, service, excellence possible.
So, what parting advice or words of wisdom can you leave us with?
Yeah, I think we absolutely sit at a very crucial, very interesting time, particularly as it relates to the workplace and even in our society. And I think if each and every one of us can take a moment each day to think about our actions, our interactions, our experiences with others, if we choose to commit to a purpose-driven culture and also one where we meaningfully connect and lead with heart and connect on purpose, we can have a much different workplace and certainly a much different society. Ultimately, each of us has the opportunity to do that. And if we spread that truly, we all can benefit immensely from it.
So where can people go to learn more about you and what you do and even get involved?
Yeah, people can obviously go to LinkedIn, super active on there, post regularly on various topics like this. Happy to connect and engage and talk through, ways that we can be supportive.
Geoffrey, thanks for coming on the show today.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Hey, we all want to scale our business. Hey, I have the answer for you today to help you do that. If you're looking to scale from 5, 6, even 7 figures and beyond, book called Be Good, Be Brief, Be Gone. I'm going to give it to you for free. All you have to do is type in growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash, and you can download the book for absolutely free. I hope the book helps you this year. Take your business to the next level. Again, go grab the book, growfast.cash. I say again, growfast.cash. I wish you the best and grow, scale, and win.
Thanks for listening to Pivot Perspectives with your host, Chris O'Byrne. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advice on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we will see you on the next episode.
There it is. Magnum. Holy moly.
Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for!
Dear